The Congress of South African Trade Unions, that of course is COSATU, in a statement said it notes the decision of their ally, the African National Congress, to expel its former president Jacob Zuma following a disciplinary hearing last week. The ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula announced the outcomes on the matter yesterday at a media briefing. Now, the former President Zuma was found guilty by the party's National Disciplinary Committee of charges including prejudicing the integrity of the organization after acting in collaboration with the uMkhonto weSizwe party. He has 21 days to expel his expulsion from the ANC. To talk more on this, we are joined by the ANC Veteran League Deputy President Mavuso Msimang. Always a pleasure to have you, Mr. Msimang. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks very much for the invitation, and happy to be talking to your viewers.
So, it has been more than 6 months since former President Jacob Zuma announced that he was going to campaign and to vote for the newly formed uMkhonto weSizwe party. Do you think that the ANC could have handled this whole situation better?
Well, there's absolutely no doubt. It's coming 2 months a little too late. But let me just say, on a positive note, that the Veterans League welcomes the decision. It's happy with the process that was, once this thing started, that was followed, and is very happy about the outcome. It couldn't have been different. But there's absolutely no doubt that this has happened 6 months too late.
Why? What went wrong with processes?
You know, so many things went wrong. In the first instance, and I think for me this is the more difficult and complicated, unforgivable excuse, is to allow the name of uMkhonto weSizwe to be registered means that there's been serious negligence on the part of the ANC. These people said before Zuma they were going to register uMkhonto weSizwe. The IEC accepted that, gazetted the thing, and the ANC was quiet. This, to me, is the worst neglect that the ANC has committed. But yes, now to then, as soon as Zuma said he was joining them, there was no doubt that I think within 2 weeks or within the announcement, they should have convened the DC, National Disciplinary Committee, and got on with the job. It's late now, you know. There are so many more things that require the attention of the nation, and the African National Congress coalition of sorts, the government of national unity is in place. And really, it's a bit of a distraction, if you want to hear from us, to be now spending hours talking about the expulsion of Zuma.
Yeah, and it certainly is. I mean, even when you hear from the likes of Snuki Zikalala, who is the Veterans League president, I mean, your colleague, and he basically is saying that this is just, it's too long. He was charged in February. This should have been done a long time ago. And to be honest with you, it is very confusing. I mean, for the voter, when you sort of saw former President Jacob Zuma, you saw his face, you saw it not with the ANC, but he was still a member of the ANC, but you saw it on the MK party, you go out to vote, you're looking at this, you know, this is, and it was all in a very short space of time. Do you, as what we heard the Secretary General Fikile Mbalula saying, this did damage the party and this cost votes. Do you believe that this in a way did cost votes, the ANC handling this situation?
Oh, I think it absolutely did. We were seen as very hesitant, uncertain about what to do. How does anybody say, I am joining another club, football club, to make an example, Bushbucks Ridge, but I'll continue to support Swallows. And then you say, well, let's see how it goes. You're in these two clubs are in the same league. It makes absolutely no sense. I don't think there is any argument about the fact that it showed the kind of dithering, hesitancy that was totally unjustifiable. Nothing was gained, if anything, the opposite. So he campaigns, takes a lot of ANC votes, and then now we come and say you are expelled. It's academic almost, but let the process be completed.
Yeah, certainly I think you said one word, indecisive, and, was dithering and dathering. And then that, perhaps maybe you'll disagree with me, or maybe you'll agree with me, has been the theme of how the ANC's leadership has been of late. Decisive leadership is something that has been missing, and perhaps this has been one of the reasons why we saw the ANC's performance in the elections going this way.
Well, unfortunately, all of that is correct. But I want to make one point very quickly, and I think not many people realize this. The worst, the punishment, so the most egregious thing that's happened is that ANC allowed the name of an organization that discharged its obligations. And when it had done that, when the ANC was banned in 1960, 1961 uMkhonto was formed because it was the only way to continue with the struggle. It carried this work magnificently in conjunction with others, nationalized, recruited people, mobilized internationally, mobilized inside the country. And the enemy now wants to talk during the negotiations. At that point, the uMkhonto weSizwe is packed up nicely and put away. Now the ANC is so negligent as to allow other people to take this organization under the banners of which people like Solomon Mahlangu and other heroes really went to the gallows. And we fail to protect this thing, and you're mentioning Chris Hani in the same breath with John Hlophe. How can it be that? That's the worst thing, and there is still a need to find a way of communicating to younger generations now, and even more in future, the coming generation, that uMkhonto weSizwe is not this thing. uMkhonto weSizwe is historically what I'm describing. That's the worst thing. Now, everything else, of course, we've been talking about renewal, 3 conferences away, which means about 15 years. We, ANC, talked about renewal, but you haven't seen the first step of that, strictly speaking. What is the program of renewal? That's, in that sense, is the indecisiveness that's cost us a lot of respect and votes from the population. And when we couldn't decide that people who are not suited to be in the organization should leave the organization, when we promised the public, as when Mbalula addressed the nation, released a statement saying that anybody who's been on that Zondo list will not be allowed to compete for the national and provincial seats. It says that, and then the next thing you find people who are known by the whole universe, whole South Africa, to have been the pillars of state capture featuring on the list. That is really what is costing us the respect of the people.
Yeah, certainly. And this is just one example of many, because, I mean, you still see people that are facing charges, then they drop ministerial positions. We'll talk just Zizi Kodwa as one example, who is then admitted back into the MP as the ANC, and then goes about resigning. So it's just, it almost feels like the party in its own way is so bureaucratic, and that it's almost paralyzed to make proper decisions. And this is one of the big problems, I imagine, that you're trying to focus in on when we talk about the cleansing of the ANC. But what I want to ask you and focus on is particularly the reputation damage, the reputational damage that you believe the former President Jacob Zuma has done to the ANC. What do you think it is?
Well, it's enormous. In the first instance, the fact that he even became elected as president is indicative of the caliber of the ANC member. This is a person who was elected to this position in 2007 after a court had found somebody guilty and sentenced them to 15 years for bribing Jacob Zuma. we elect this person at a time also when there were case headlines about him raping, allegedly, a person who had come to look for assistance, daughter of a colleague of his. And then, of course, the judgment was that it wasn't rape, it was consensual. All of that is extremely embarrassing. Then you have this eponymous shower cap being pinned on your president because they think showering will going to help prevent HIV/AIDS, and then we end up with state capture, which would not have happened had the Guptas not been such good friends of the president. So this should have been one of the easiest matters. We should have said, thank you very much for leaving. We should not actually have, not even in retrospect, it was very clear that we are factionalized. There is no explanation for why a person with the kind of record that I'm talking about would be elected president of this country. And it happened. I wish I could disagree with you on many of the things that you're saying about dithering and so on. It's difficult to disagree with that.
Indeed. Well, let's have a look at what's now been decided, and it would be quite interesting to get a bit of clarity on what this actually means. That the expulsion means that he will no longer be celebrated as the party's past president. What does that mean? I mean, we can't erase history. Certainly, we can't do that. But how do we do that? How do we sort of erase the memory of Zuma and not celebrate him as a past president? Not invited to events, not having paintings of him around. How does that happen? What do we do here?
Well, I think if we were vengeful, what we would do is to have his name and have a huge block there and have a little thing that says JSD. I don't think it should be celebrated, quite frankly. I don't think I'm not saying he's Hitler, but no one would like to celebrate Hitler, even as he was the chancellor at the time. So I do agree that you cannot honor a person who has caused so much harm to the ANC and so much to the nation because the ANC happened to be the government. On that one, I am in agreement. You can't expunge him from the records. You might have a black hole, however you want to indicate the indignation of the party, the disagreement with his things. That's fine. My understanding is that that's what they mean, that he can't be honored. Absolutely, you cannot.
I mean, last year you publicly voiced your intentions to leave the ANC, but then, of course, you reversed your decision, which we do know. The conversations that you had around the Zuma situation, was this one of the key reasons why you wanted to walk away? Or was this just one of many that were just building up and up? Because at the end of the day, Zuma wasn't working alone. We know that. Zuma was working within a party that was very much so aware of what he was doing.
Yeah, go back to that resignation letter, which I don't regret. Unfortunately, it was handled very badly by Luthuli House. The fact of the matter is the ANC has not fulfilled on its commitments. It tells its members, it tells the nation that it is very opposed to corruption. It's not comfortable with that. But it takes no actions to remove the corrupt among its ranks. This is what's... And so the consequences of that is that, the corrupt don't just steal money. They put in place in critical, important public positions people who are not suited to be in those positions. The consequence of poor service delivery is exactly what has happened by deploying people merely because they're friends of others. It's nepotism. You get a declaration that we're going to do away with state capture and thievery. And in comes a very difficult era for the nation when these PPEs are stolen and people make a Ponzi scheme out of it. And they do this all because they have proximity to government. And we are timid and completely helpless to do anything about that. Yes, these and many other neglects that really were healable and still are, if the ANC decided to focus on its task of that was started by the people who liberated this country, we would be talking a different story. We have lost the mandate to run this country. We don't have it. At 40%, you have no right to lead the country. You then go and look for an ally. Believe it or not, arithmetic does matter. If that ally is going to take you above the 51% that is required for you to remain in government, then you start evaluating the cause and the pros and cons of doing that thing. Then there's a huge noise about the unsuitability of that. Let's not, we should have, all this hesitancy. People have talked about, once it became clear that we had lost, we had gained such a low percentage in voter approval. The question was, how do you take the nation forward? There was a time when Kgalema Motlanthe said, the best thing is if we continue unable to solve our problems of corruption, we should sit in the opposition benches. The situation in South Africa is such that actually it would have been very irresponsible of the ANC to do that, because among the rest of the parties, there is no cohesion and so on. So the next best thing to do was to stay in government and look for partners, not necessarily always your best friends, but there are certain criteria that were put in place, Do they support the Constitution? Are they committed to all the things? And then you go into a partnership with them.
Yeah.
We have gone through a debate where people are saying you are moving backward. Whatever happened to us? We are, for instance, on the question of the DA, we had 40, they had 20, we're twice as big as them. Why do people fear that working with them is going to take us back? Are we really so very inferior that we're unable, as soon as we come together with them, our programs will change? We know what we want. We may know we should know what the limitations of the DA are, work around that. And I'm telling you, looking at what has happened since then, I'm glad. I do wish that fewer people, this is a personal opinion, when you've got too many moving parts, things don't go fast.
Yeah.
Take an IFP, take in the DA, and have the ANC. You'd have a government that was more manageable, and you'd get on with the long neglected task of serving people.
All right. We've got to leave it there, unfortunately. The sentiment, however, I can't imagine that the former Deputy President is going to go silently into the night. He's got 21 days to appeal this. A yes or no answer. We've got to go to news. Do you think he'll appeal?
Oh, it's up to him. For me, it's completely irrelevant. As long as we don't put oxygen into that effort, there are things to do now instead of attending to what Zuma does or doesn't do. It's done and finished. Maybe you guys in the media are putting the oil on it.
Thank you. Mavuso Msimang, Deputy President of the ANC Veterans League.